Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. So as I promised, today I'm going to share with you how to map ER model to relational database. As I mentioned before, there are three levels in database design. The first one is conceptual design, where you are going to use ER diagram. The second phase is logical design, where you are going to transform the ER diagram to relational model and then normalize the model. And the third phase is physical design, where you are going to use SQL language to turn from your design into database. So today we are going to go through how to map the ER diagram to relational model. So this is the summary of the step that you have to do in mapping ER diagram to relational model. So the first and second one is for you to identify which entity is the strong entity and which one is the weak entity. So for each entity, you also have to identify which one is the simple attribute, composite attribute, multi-value attribute, and also derived attribute. Okay, and you also have to choose which one is the primary key. For both entity, you already done it before, so you have to identify which one is the primary key for strong entity and which one is the primary key for the weak entity. So let me look at this example here. We have here two entity, that is branch and manager. So for this entity, branch entity, you have three attribute, that is branch number, branch address, and telephone number. So you have to identify which kind of attribute they are. So for branch number, since it's only one value, so you can say this is a simple attribute. But for branch address, since you might have separate attribute for one address, so you can call it a composite attribute. So for a composite attribute, you have to separate all the attribute into single attribute. Okay, simple attribute. So from branch address, you separate it into branch address line 1, branch address line 2, branch city, branch postcode, and branch state. Okay, then you also have telephone number, that is multi-value attribute. So because it is a multi-value attribute, you have to put it aside first. You don't have to put inside your relational model yet. Okay, so you will put it at the last part of the relational model step. And then you identify the primary key. The primary key is branch number. So you write down the primary key branch number here. So for the next entity, that is manager, there is 4 attribute, that is manager number, manager name, date of application, and bonus. So we identify that this is all simple attribute. So you just will write down all the attribute inside the relational model. Okay, so now let us look at this example. We are going to try to use the Okay, so we are going to try to use this step and start draw our relational model. So I'm going to write down the relational model in this notepad, okay, so that it's more easy for you to see how we are going to transform the ER diagram to relational model. Okay, so if you can see here, we go to the first entity, that is customer. So for customer, we have two attributes, that is customer ID and customer name. So customer ID is simple attribute, but customer name, it might be composite attribute because it can be customer first name and last name. So we are going to write down here. So this is the customer, the entity name, and we have here customer ID, customer first name, and customer last name. Okay, so we already write here the entity name and the attribute, right? Next is the primary key. So the primary key here is customer ID. So now we go to the next attribute, that is next entity, that is a vehicle. So for vehicle, we write first the entity name and then the attribute. So we have here vehicle ID. So vehicle ID is simple attribute, vehicle name also simple attribute, and model also simple attribute. So we just write down all the attribute name inside the entity, vehicle name and model. Then don't forget the primary key, that is vehicle ID. Next, we go to the manufacturer entity. It have here manufacturer ID and manufacturer name, so both are simple attribute. How you want to identify is it simple or not? Just make sure that it have only one data. If you can separate it into a few value, then it might be composite or multi-value attribute. So if it only have one data, one kind of data, then it is considered as simple attribute. Okay, so you already put the entity name and attribute name. Next is the primary key, that is manufacturer ID. All right, so next is we have here three attribute or three entity, that is agent, permanent, and temporary. So this is actually the parent and child. Okay, agent is the parent, permanent and temporary is the child. So we just write down. Okay, so agent code and agent name also we consider as simple attribute. So we just write down the attribute name, agent name. The primary key is agent code. Okay, and then for child, okay, so you have here permanent. Okay, the attribute here is fixed salary and allowance. Okay, so for child attribute, child entity, it always carry the primary key for parent. So you have to put primary key for parent, and this one become the primary key. Okay, primary key for parent always become primary key for child. And have another one, temporary. We have here also our salary and commission, which is both simple attribute. Okay, so next is the primary key. Okay, so the primary key is agent code. Okay, so now you already transform all the six entity into relational model using the first step. Okay, so we go to the next step, step 3. So for step 3, we start to map the relationship. So we are going to look for one-to-many relationship. So in this ER diagram, okay, how you want to identify the one-to-many relationship? you see the relationship here. So here is the participation and cardinality. So you see the cardinality here. Okay, so you look at the back. Okay, so this is one and this is many. So this is one to many relationship. This one is also one to many, and then this one is one to one, and this one is many to many. So for step 3, we are going to focus on one to many relationship. So for one to many relationship, you have to include parents' primary key in child as foreign key. So here you have to take the primary key from one n as parent and then many n as child. So if you see here, so one n as parent, many n as child. So customer become parent and vehicle become child. You should take the primary key from parent, become foreign key for child. So how you are going to do that? Okay, so this is between customer and vehicle. We have to add foreign key. So you take the primary key from parent, that is customer ID, as foreign key for child. So you have to put here foreign key, customer ID, reference, and then you put the entity name of parent, that is customer. Okay, entity name for parent. And what is the name for the primary key in parent? That is customer ID. Okay, so you have here foreign key customer ID. So you have to add also inside here customer ID. Okay, got it? Okay, to make it less confused, I'm going to put it full name here just to make it different from the name in entity customer. So here when you put customer ID, you also have here foreign key customer ID. So the name here in foreign key should same in the child. Okay, this is the name for child. Okay, and this one is the name in parent. Okay, so make sure that you link it in a good way. Alright, so this is for the first one, that is between customer and vehicle. And then next we also have manufacturer and vehicle. So which one is parent and which one is child? So for parent, one n is parent, many n is child. So what you will have is manufacturer as parent and vehicle as child, right? So you should take the primary key from parent, become foreign key in child. So here we have manufacturer, this is parent and this is child. So you add here another foreign key, manufacturer ID. Okay, so I will add here manufacturer ID, and then so this is the name for child, and then we put for parents. Reference manufacturer, and then the attribute in the parent manufact ID. Okay, so this is for part 1. I will see you in the next part to continue with other relationship.